Hi, my name is Rami, and I'm a UI designer. Today I'll be walking you through my design process of the Overwatch character selection screen. I spent many hours playing the game and wanted to pay homage in the form of a UI design of the selection screen or a reimagination of how it would look like in Overwatch 2. I'll be going through the several stages from the goal of the project through to research, conception and solutions, user testing, and final thoughts. So let's see. Here we have it. Let's get rid of those. Sorry, I have to go through my notes as I'm trying to show this off to you. So yes, pen to paper, the digital mock-up, and the final product. That's what we'll be going through today. The goal of the project was imagining and recreating the Overwatch 2 character selection screen and providing all the important information the player needs before the match begins. Researching and addressing the shortcomings of the original design and how I can improve it by tweaking the layout and adding extra information without the need to skip into another screen. And finally, keeping the overall design familiar and streamlined. Let's go to the next one. So this is the menu as it currently stands in the game, the original menu. And yeah, let's move on to research. The original Overwatch selection character selection menu is really great at what it does. It shows the time to assemble the team, as seen right here. Um, the heroes available, um, hero skins, and their abilities, which is this little button over here. The potential problematic areas that I personally felt needed to be addressed is that the menu does not show the enemy team roster. As you can see, this is our own team, assemble your team. And second problem is the hero info screen is a full screen that pops up and hides this entire window over here. So once this button is pressed, this entire screen goes away and then another screen pops up with all the abilities and the ultimate for each hero with a little bit of text explaining what they do. But this entire screen no longer exists and you have to click on a button to exit it. There's also a shortcut for this button by pressing F1. I think it was pressing F1 or holding F1 and then releasing it goes back to this menu over here, but not a whole lot of people knows about that one. Third problem is the menu doesn't seem to have any design. The menu hasn't been designed with all the new hero additions that followed the release of the game, and the current iteration of the menu has all classes cramped up in one line and no spare room for other additions. As we can see over here, these are the tanks, the DPS heroes, and then the support heroes, which mostly are the healers essentially, and they cramp them all in one line with the categories being essentially these boxes over here. Next, once a hero is highlighted, their name is displayed at the bottom of their portrait, uh, which I personally find problematic because it is very limiting in terms of character count or the font size, depending on if the hero name is too long. So we see this right over here. It stretches out if depending on the name of the hero, it can become a little bit of a smaller text, so you can fit it within this um, portrait frame. All right, conception and solution. Uh, Redesigning the layout in such a way that every category of the um, redesigning the layout in such a way that every category of the heroes, i.e. tanks, DPS, and support, are separate from each other instead of laid out in one straight line or a row. This makes it possible to hide the other two hero classes if the player queues up as a role. So if the player queues up as a DPS, for instance, the game could hide the entire row for um, tanks or for the support and just displays the heroes that are accessible to the player at the time of queuing up, depending on the game mode and whatnot. Um, this also solved the screen issue of having to cramp all of them in one line, as previously seen in the original mockup here, or not the mockup, but the original design of the menu. It solves the issue of having to cramp everything on one line, but rather have these kind of categories like that doesn't take up the entire screen, gives up more space so you can keep adding more as, you know, Overwatch 2 is being under development and continue to be supported as a live service by adding more heroes and whatnot. Um, yeah. Also, one point that I wanted to make was that providing the specific hero abilities on the screen as the player flips through the roster rather than hiding it behind the second screen. That is something I wanted to put somewhere on the screen. It ended up being on this side for the final design rather than covering the entire screen with that. Um, uh, Switching the player to a different screen so they can see what the abilities for each hero are. So let's say you hover over this character, you click once, or you click once, or you click once. The player model is displayed right here in the middle, their skins and whatnot, and then the abilities are shown right here directly so you can see what you want for new players, what this specific character does. Um, yes. Um, And the other point was that I wanted to display the enemy team as you're selecting your own team, the roster before the match begins. You could see what the other team is doing and kind of coordinate with your team to better match what the other team is doing so you can counter them better. Fourth point was is providing better spacing between the on-screen elements while still displaying more information and better future proofing. This goes back to all the things that I said. I'm displaying more information by giving the abilities over here, but also allowing for more room to grow as the game grows, as far as adding more heroes and whatnot, and still giving the exact same information that the players currently receive in the current iteration of the game. Fifth point is the addition to the locked in, adding a select text at the bottom of the highlighted hero portrait better communicates that the player can also double tap the button or the hero portrait in this case to select it for a faster locking of the desired hero. So, as in the previous example, instead of showing Roadhog, we could just put select over here instead, so that the player knows if I double tap this button instead of clicking here and then select. Um, I can very easily like just select that character. I don't have to move my mouse over and whatnot. Just a faster way of selecting the character. Alrighty. Um, Obviously, this is my pen and paper work, and then if we move over here, this is how I try to mock it to get a better understanding of how things are going to be laid out, the spacing, uh, the negative space, and spacing from the edges and whatnot. um, just trying out the idea in kind of like a gray box area. I was also playing with 6 heroes on each team. That's not going to be the case for Overwatch 2. It's going to be 5 players only, but I was mocking up ideas of how I wanted to represent each team, their portraits, and how it's laid out. So I got this way, um, and then I have created this style. I also tried something like this, maybe, and finally landed on something like this over here, which I felt gives enough spacing. You can see your team, and then you could also read what level they are, or click the button next to them to get more information about display it right here, like their player profile, if you want to mute this player, and other options. All right, moving on. Artist and user testing. After the initial mockup was designed, I peer reviewed it to get a variety of points of view and reactions and feedback. This presented me with numerous points to address with my design. Number one, the initial design was a bit cluttered because my elements were a little bit too large and a lack of negative space. So in the original design, these portraits for the heroes were much larger, not that large, but they were a little bit larger. Same thing with the boxes for hero skins, the hero name, the hero info, these boxes were a little bit bigger, and this overall model was kind of taking up a whole lot of space. Also, the game mode, timer, game type, map, and region flag were much larger, so I had to reduce those down as to give them more spacing on each side, and it's more readable. Gives a little bit of that negative space between the elements. It's easier on the eyes. The background, actually, I can move on to this thing. So that's what the final mock-up ended up looking like. As you can see, this was still large at the time. I had to correct that. But overall, my design from this translated very well to this thing over here with enough space for additional heroes. So the background, as you can see here, is a 3D background. Needed to be blurred out more because it was a little too distracting, and it helped bring out all of these elements more to the foreground. It wasn't as distracting or even nauseating to look at. The in the animation, I also actually I can pull up the animation here. So in this animation, you can see there is some camera shake going on in the background. I had to tone that down a little bit as well because people felt like they were kind of getting motion sickness out of it. So it was toned down. As you can see, the background was blurred. You could basically make out the shapes of the map with the player model. The highlighted hero is brought up to the forefront. Um, the 3D model of the hero needed to also be scaled down, and the bottom of it needed to be blurred out into the background. I previously had the 3D model displayed kind of floating in the air. It wasn't looking right. There wasn't any connection to the world because it was just floating there. So I had to bring it down a little bit and blur out the bottom edge of it so as to like not be too distracted against all of the hero portraits over here. And then there was also a unanimous agreement. Let me bring up Photoshop back. There was also a unanimous agreement that the player shouldn't know the enemy team roster that, as seen here in the initial mockup, because this highly affected the start of the game. In the game, when the player presses the tab button, it shows both teams' roster, but the first attack, the other team is never revealed until the first engagement. And by having both teams displayed on the selection screen, it just removed that element of surprise. It removed the core element of how every match starts. Alrighty. Moving on to my final thoughts. Overall, I'm very pleased with how the final design turned out. I came to the project with a different idea in my head and ended up with something even better and more streamlined, in my humble opinion. I wasn't planning on animating this piece initially, but after I showed it to a couple of friends and game developers of my friends of mine, they encouraged me to animate it using After Effects, something like After Effects, and to just to kind of have the overall piece pop up more as seen here on my portfolio. I had to relearn After Effects after not having used it in a long time, and I kind of enjoyed it. The project uh, it wasn't initially planned to be included in the project timeframe that I gave for myself from start to finish, but I managed to squeeze it in, and I initially gave myself about 2 to 4 weeks to finish this mock-up, so I can use it on my portfolio, as I said. This included the researching, the mocking up, the pen and paper, user feedback gathering, and trying out different layouts and ideas to kind of see what I can come up with best works for the player and gives out the exact information needed. I managed to do that, all of that, plus catching up all After Effects, animated the entire prototype to satisfactory level to me. And because of the lack of green screen in the game, I even had to learn new things such as tracing Roadhog model as seen here from a video I took from a video clip I took from in game, so I could use them in the background. There is some artifacting going on here. I tried to clean that up, but it wasn't a big problem. It got the point across. I'd like to thank you guys for taking the time to watch my walkthrough to my design process, and I hope you enjoyed it. I apologize for the kind of raw format of the video. It was kind of on a short notice request, so I hope you guys are happy with the results. Thank you very much. Have a good day.